Welcome to another exciting episode of Get Hired with Job Gladiator. That's me, Michael Altschuler, and I have the privilege and the pleasure on each episode bringing you the top hiring managers and recruiters and business owners, and yes, even career coaches who are going to share with you the do's and don'ts of what it takes to really land a job in this very challenging job market. And they're going to tell you what not to do, those mistakes that we all make, to not make those mistakes so you do indeed land that job of your dreams. Today, we have a first. We have a couple, the dynamic duo that are going to share with you insights and strategies, tactics, techniques, kind of a roadmap of what you need to get out there and get more interviews and ace your interviews and be clear on your career path and how you transfer your skills and qualifications over to that new job that you want. Let me share a little bit about Ciprani. Did I say that right?
You did.
Ciprani. Yeah, wow, that's something from a guy from New Jersey. Ciprani Consulting, we have Linzee and Steve, the co-founders. They are a recruiting and training company that specializes in the field of small business building and recruiting. The company has placed and trained, get this, over 3,000 talented individuals within the small business community. That's awesome. In addition, Linzee is the founder of Linzee Ciprani Team, and that is a real estate team with Keller Williams that uses the processes and systems of Ciprani Consulting. The Linzee Ciprani Team was built from the ground up in 1 year and closes, get this, 40 million a year. That's a big number. The couple also owns Ciprani Productions. Basically what this means is they don't sleep because they also have 2 little girls, and which has multiple training programs for sale to help real estate teams double and triple their businesses, multiple rental properties, and the co-hosts of the Leader Equation Leadership podcast. They are the true description of entrepreneurs, and from speaking to them earlier, of good people, good parents, and they want to make a difference. Welcome, the dynamic duo, the Ciprani team. How you doing, Linzee? How you doing, Steve?
We're good. We're excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
Oh,
awesome, Michael. We're pumped.
Yeah, me too, brother. So let's start kind of in the beginning. You know, this is being filmed during the pandemic. So we have a lot of challenge. 10 million people, I think was the last number, that are unemployed. So being in this business, what are like the top 3 things, if you were going to give 3 bits of advice to someone seeking a job, that you have to do these things, and these things are going to be most impactful in either getting more interviews or acing the interview or being clear on a career path? What bit of advice? And we'll start with Linzee, because my mom always taught me ladies go first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, moms know best. And plus, Zig Ziglar said, the man's the head of the house, but the woman's the neck, and it's the neck that turns the head. So we all understand that. So Linzee, let's kick it off with you. Tell us what, from your perspective, and listen, we know you're married and we know you work together, and we know you don't always agree 100% on everything. And that's good, because that's the way we grow. So if you don't agree, I'm perfectly amenable to hearing both sides of the story. And then you guys can flush it out after the episode and talk about, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. Okay. But Linzee, why don't you get started and share top 3 things that you think would help people during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think, obviously having a really great resume that has bullet points. So we believe that you should actually bullet point and bold the things that should stand out to somebody right away, right? So I believe a good resume is one, which we have a resume course on our website if anybody would like that and wants to learn more. But the second and the third thing, once you apply to something, Michael, I think it's very important to continue to follow up. So we say that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? I do think it's very important to continue to say, hey, I just want to make sure you received my resume. Wanted to see if you have any questions. Let me know if I can answer anything. I'm really interested in the position, right? Most people just send something and then they just leave it and they expect a phone call, right? You have to be proactive in this market. And that was the third thing I was going to say, is just proactive, right? Going after somebody and truly staying in front of the recruiter or in front of the person that's hiring, making sure that they know that you're very interested, placing the phone call, placing the email, following up. Those things are really important in this market to get a job, is my opinion. So
Yeah. Awesome.
Perfect. And we're going to, and by the way, we're going to touch, as we move down this, we're going to touch on what that looks like and sounds like. What's a great resume? You talked a little bit about bullet points and bolding things, because it's 4 to 6 seconds that a recruiter or hiring manager has today with the great influx of resumes that they're getting and the applicant tracking system. So we're going to talk about what that looks like and sounds like from your perspective that will land someone an interview. Steve, what are your thoughts on that? Top 3 things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that, Michael. And I think the weird thing about the pandemic is, there's been this convergence of all areas of our life, right? So, we're all working from home. And if you have kids, they're running around in the background, and there's just lots of stuff going on. And we're really hiring, and we're really present in a virtual world right now. So I think use that to your advantage. Pay attention to the little things. If you're doing a Zoom interview, or if you're doing some kind of interview, as recruiters, I'm looking at you, but I'm also looking at what's behind you. So be very careful with the little things. Yeah, I like your background, very nice. But that would be just the first one. It's the more things change, the more they say the same. Be prepared. Pay attention to the little things. If you just took a shower and you left your towel behind you, and I see that, and you say you're really organized, I'm going to question you a little bit there, right? So that would definitely be one I would say. This is more based in interviewing, but I would say, smile. You do need to sell yourself, even if you don't like thinking of yourself as a salesperson. You are selling yourself in this job market. If you don't, the people that do that well are going to get the jobs. And I think the last one would just be authentic, right? Go after jobs that you really want. Go after positions that align with your values. If you're brand new in sales, right, and you're applying for a director of sales role, you're probably not going to get that. We see all the time people that, are forklift operators or something like that applying for $100,000 jobs. Grow into that. There's nothing wrong with starting somewhere and growing from there. But I think just be realistic too of where you are and where you want to go.
Yeah, perfect. And these are all key tenets of what someone needs to do. And I agree with everything so far. It is all the little things. It is the resume. And as we know, all the little things add up to the big things. And that's what gives you, and it becomes a tipping point that, it's not business as usual in terms of looking for a job. Certain tenets are the same. There's certain, success leaves clues, but this is a little more competitive, or a lot more competitive than it used to be. So how do you, before you maybe had to stand out in front of 50 people, now you have to stand out in front of 250 people. So how do you get through that? How do you become that beacon of light amongst all these other lights that are shining also, or shiny objects, whatever you want to call it? But how do you get noticed in this sea of candidates? So with that said, when you, as recruiters, is there one particular question that you have that's like a favorite question that reveals a lot to you? And you said, and you're not the first, which I like, because there's a common denominator of success. They'll hear it on many episodes that there's a lot of things that are said the same way, a different way, but the same message. About the little things in the resume and having things jump because you only have a short time to get their attention and to gain their interest. But different people have different questions that they use to really flush out transparency, authenticity. We'll go to you, Linzee, again. What do you think would be a great question? What are your favorite questions that you would ask someone that reveals a lot?
I have a lot of favorite questions, right? And they really, it stems from what position am I hiring too? Because I have a favorite question for like an operations person and a favorite question for, a salesperson.
I want you to give some of those for the different positions.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Well, so I mean, for an operations person, I want to know exactly what systems you have created. And then here's the thing, it's all in the follow-up that comes along with that, right? Because somebody can tell me, hey, I've created an onboarding system for new real estate agents or whatever it is, right? So then it's, okay, walk me through, what system did you use and how did you do it? What was the first step? How did you plan it out? And you really dive in, because a lot of people can say that they created things and they didn't really create them, right? And you can see it as you question around that one question. And so that's one of my favorite ones for operations professionals. For salespeople, I love to ask them specifically, what's one question I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you? What's one thing I should know that I didn't get to know about you? And it's really funny because now if you ask that question of an operations person, Michael, they're so stressed out because it's not the normal question. It's like, wait, why'd you just ask me that? I don't know. Their answer every time in operations is nothing. We covered all the things that are on all the websites, right? Salespeople, though, it's so cool, and really talented people, they think about that question and the answers we get from that are just awesome, because it's so cool to watch them. They'll say, you know what, you don't know anything about my personal life. I want you to know about my kids, and I want you to know, and then boom, now I've got their values, right? And so that's become one of my very favorite questions to ask people. In fact, I ask it for almost everything that I do, because, if we can get one more piece of information that's going to help us understand them better, it's gold. So
Right. That's great. And I like this because it's revealing, like you said, it shows, and when you mentioned, Steve, about the towel behind you, we oftentimes talk about that what you're doing behind the scenes will be reflective of what you'll do on the scene when you're hired. Yeah. And the example I always use on every episode, so I have to throw it out there, it's like when you guys dated. Okay, you're dating. Steve, you better have been opening the door, had good manners, got roses every now and then, not because you were a bad boy, just because you wanted to show your affection for your girlfriend. Listen, if you weren't doing that and at your best behavior, wooing your girlfriend and or your boyfriend during the courtship, do not expect it to get better once that ring is on the finger and you're married. Okay, because the commitment, that's when it starts. That's when it's harder to do it. So yeah. I think the same thing holds true when you're looking for a job, that when someone shows, if you're not putting your best foot forward during the dating, the courtship of getting that job, if those habits aren't in place and smiling's not there and you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's, the grammar on the resume and all those little things that we look at as people that hire people or coach people to be hired, then we're going to say they're sloppy. They're going to be sloppier at work, and they're, and by the way, with your example, Steve, about the towel they just took a shower behind, they may not pay attention to detail, but at least they're clean.
That's true.
I'm an optimist. I like to look on the good side. Maybe they just wanted to show me they're clean people and they take showers. They're not going to smell up the office. Not that that matters when we're doing this via Zoom. But anyway, yeah, great stuff. So, Steve, how about you? What would you say is?
Well, Linzee, she always gives great examples. It's always hard to follow that act. But I would say one question you're going to get, this is maybe not one of my favorites, but it's something I would want everyone to always be prepared for in going into an interview. They're going to ask you about what your strengths and weaknesses are, right? I mean, that question is as old as time. What I want to say about that, so we do use that question of, what are your strengths? Or sometimes we'll rephrase it and say, what's something you can do that someone else can't do? What I want to comment on is to say how many people sometimes miss that real opportunity to sell themselves, or really think through that question of, well, what makes me unique as a candidate, right? Everybody has their own unique experiences. Doesn't matter if you're just starting your career or you've been doing it for 30 years. You have to package that information in a meaningful way to someone. And another thing I would say about that is make sure not only you know the answer to what your strengths are, recruiters are always looking for specificity. So if I say I'm really passionate, I don't give you an example and I'm kind of like, hey, Michael, I'm really passionate. Can't you tell? Sell that, right? If you're a passionate person, give me an example of a way that you've changed someone else's business. Or if you're really detail oriented, tell me about something that you did to go above and beyond for your boss. So I think that's what we're looking for on the other end. And I think that's what, if you're a candidate, you should be really thinking about.
Yeah, that's great. And I would add one thing to that, that when I love being specific, and I would say specificity, but I have trouble saying that word. So I love when to be specific, to give examples, they're concrete examples. Tell a story as a time when when your passion demonstrated a great result for your company. Use numbers. By virtue of doing this, I saved the company 40% and we increased production by 60%. So when you give that, you quantify, you add emotion to what already is a great, let's call it idea or accomplishment. You add more oomph to it. And I also like the final part of that is all they care about, the hiring manager, the recruiter, and tell me if you agree with this, is are you indeed the best candidate for this position? So if you can tie it back, and you should, tie it back to what they're looking for, what the job description is, what outcomes they want from that position. And if you could tie back your accomplishment that you had at your previous job and how you could get that same goal accomplished for their company based on your passion, that's what's going to be really meaningful, getting your story into their bloodstream around their job. Linzee, did you want to add to that?
You know what I was going to say too? I think something that's really important that a lot of people don't think about is don't just say the exact same numbers or the exact same things that are on your resume, right? Have something that's different.
I like that.
So that your resume stands out and gets noticed, and then don't just repeat the, well, I saved the company $40,000 or whatever. Give me a different example of when you did the exact same thing, and maybe it was just a little bit less, and bring it back to, and I think you probably saw on my resume, I also did that, and I saved them 40,000. I just wanted you to know there are two separate times that happened, right? Or something like that, because then that shows that you've continued in that progress and you've continued to make things better, not just a one-time wonder, right?
Yeah, and I love that. And it's because you can't, resumes today, and we'll talk about when we get into resumes about how long. Everyone has a different opinion. The opinions don't vary greatly, but how long and where things should be placed and how things should be placed. We want to give everyone's opinion of that to the job seeker so they can pick the one. All will work. They just pick one they're most comfortable with and go with that. But to your point, you can't list everything if you have a lot of accomplishments. So it's a great way to say, in addition to what you saw on the resume, I've also done this. It's a great way, to your point, Steve, to continue to brag on yourself. This is the time to do it. They're asking you to say what they're saying with your strengths, how you should interpret that is, what great superpowers do you have that you can put to use here in this job that we should say, you're the right person, man, because you're great. This is your time to shine, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And if I could just, one other thing too, so many people will say when I ask that question to them, well, I don't really know what might make me different. So it's almost like you're going to perform something. You say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't really warm up that much for this song that I'm about to play for you, but just give me 1 second, but people, I think, don't realize that they're on camera. So the camera of life is always on. And I think make this a little bit of a performance. This isn't actually the job, but we are looking for things like you said about the dating part of this, where I want to see you at your best here. And if this is what you're bringing to your best, then that is going to make me worry about where you're going to land in the career.
Yeah. Everyone, it's a common denominator amongst everyone I interview. And I say it, and Tom Hopkins, who I cite this one phrase all the time in my speeches and my coaching, and it's the toughest thing to do. And if you're listening to this, which you are right now, you're going to hear it. It's across every single episode. You're going to hear prepare, prepare, prepare. Tom Hopkins says it: practice, drill, and rehearse. Practice, drill, and rehearse. Practice, drill, and rehearse. All the greatest athletes in the world take 1,000 shots, whether it's golf, whether it's basketball, and you ask them, why are you taking it? And they're the best. Why are you taking 1,000 shots? Because they know that practice and preparation keeps them the best in the world. So there's no way to get away from that. You have to, the more you practice, the more you prepare, the better you're going to perform. And the better you perform, the higher the likelihood you're going to get the job. So all these great ideas that you're going to hear are meaningless, 100% meaningless, unless you commit. And if you do, you're going to be one of the few, because not everyone does it, You're going to be one of the few that does the preparation, practices, rehearses, so that way when it's showtime, as Steve said, you're going to be able to shine and differentiate yourself from all those that didn't prepare and practice to perform at their highest level.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, and no one likes to do it. I talk about the marathon. Everyone's okay. They get ready. They're excited at the beginning of the marathon. Okay, you get started. You're all revved up. The end of the marathon, thank goodness you see the finish line. Everyone gets charged up with there. But that middle part of the marathon, oh my gosh, it's arduous. It kills you, right? That's the time. That's kind of what I called where you practice, you rehearse relentlessly until you don't want to do it anymore, and you do it some more. That you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Comfort's a killer of success. If you don't feel like doing it, chances are it's the right thing to do. So do it, you'll get the edge, and you'll move forward on getting the job. Now, weakness, let's go back to weakness. The strength's great time to shine. And then tie it back to the company and give examples. I love everything you said. And you're listening to this, write this down and do it. The next thing is tell me about your weakness. I've heard this said a few ways. When I interviewed hundreds, maybe thousands of people during my career, I would say, tell me something that if I sent you on a seminar to improve upon right now, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that you say, Mike, take me to this seminar to get better at this, or this?
Sure.
And that's how I kind of soften the blow about tell me your greatest weakness, which can be a little intimidating, but also I think this is an opportunity, and I want to hear your points on this. It's an opportunity for someone to shine, acknowledging that we all have weaknesses, and how do you overcome them, and how do you actually get better as a result of them? So, Steve, why don't we start with you? Share when you ask that question, how do you ask it, and what kind of responses would be the best responses?
Yeah, and Michael, I think I'm in line with your thinking there too. I actually usually say, an area for improvement, because I don't look at it like we're flawed and it can't be fixed. I'm similar to you, I think, in that way. But obviously, as you've said, we all have things we can work on and be better at. What I'm typically looking for is going back to another thing we touched on earlier is authenticity, right? Be honest in that response. There's plenty of opportunity, again, to sell yourself on the things you're great at. This is really where you can say, this is where I want to know, we want this person to be able to be molded, right? And so, typically we follow the idea of we want someone that's humble, hungry, and smart. And that's where I'm looking for that humility piece, right? If you can show me that you're self-aware and that you're humble and that you're growth-minded, I don't care how unorganized you are. I know I can work with you as your leader. Or I don't care how afraid you are to maybe pick up the phone and talk to someone, or if you don't have the soft skills you need, right? What I want to know is, can I build into you as a new employee? And I think a lot of owners are looking for that thing. So I think, again, authenticity, be humble, show your cards, because we're trained to figure out if you're not telling us the truth, right? And then we'll spot that and we will point that out to our employer.
That's wonderful. So can you give the listeners an example, and we can kind of role play you and I, that you're interviewing me. And
Sure.
By the way, thank you for having me in for this interview. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I want to be totally transparent and authentic. I'm kind of desperate. No, I wouldn't say that, but thank you for having me. Thank you for having me here, Steve. Really appreciate it. Really excited about this opportunity, about what your company's doing. I went online. I see some new divisions that you opened up and new products that you're launching. And I'm really excited to be part of that and help you achieve your goals and be a part of that. So can you tell me, or you can ask me, or I want to ask you rather, sorry. I want to ask you,
Okay.
What areas do you think that you could use improvement in, and why? What do you do about that? What are your greatest challenges?
Well, Michael, thank you so much for asking me that. I really appreciate that. This has been something that's just maybe part of who I am. I've always been this way, but one thing I've been training myself on in my own personal development is being more structured. That is typically something that doesn't come naturally to me. So one of the things I do to kind of work on that is I time block my calendar more. I set an agenda every day, but it's just an area I love connecting with people. And I think I'm really good at that. And I value relationships, but time can fly right by when sometimes you're focused on that. So one thing I've started to implement and do is just be more disciplined and be more organized with my calendar. And that's helped me. That would definitely be something in this position that I would love some more coaching on to get better at, and even better than I am currently. But that's one thing I'd love to work on.
That's beautiful. And that's not a problem. I appreciate your being honest and open about that. And we all have challenges with different things, and that's something surely we'll help you with. We're glad you have good relationship skills, because that's harder to teach than organizational skills. And I can definitely relate to that. So thank you for sharing that, Steve. You're hired.
So can I just point out,
the reason I tried to answer
that, the reason I answered it that way, Michael, was it's not just, hey, here's what I'm doing to address that, right? So I think, again, you be authentic. You're self-aware that this is an area for growth. But in addition to that, here's what I'm doing. That gets you to that next level. And that shows a mature individual that you want to work with.
Yeah, I love that. And that growth mindset that we're all willing to grow, get better, and be coachable, which is a big thing. And especially, I'll add one more thing, that those of you who are listening to this that are older, understand that is going to be the elephant in the room. Because when you're older, you go in for an interview, you're going to be looked at as, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and probably set in his or her ways, and not that good with computers. So people have their, hiring managers, those that are interviewing you, have their preconceived notions. If you're young and don't have experience, or if you're old and have tons of experience, and why are you still looking? Why don't you have a secure position right now? So you have to deal with those things in a way that is proactive, in a way that is positive, but get them out in the open. So, and I'd love you guys to speak to that. But before we do, Linzee, I'd like you to share your thoughts on greatest weakness and how you deal with that.
I think everything that Steve said was perfect there. It's an interesting thing. So many people give you one weakness, right? The truth is, if you're going to be authentic, we have a number of them, right? And there are probably a number of things I can say. I actually really appreciate the people that say, you know what? There are 3 or 4 things that I've been working on for a while. And here's what I've done to manage them. And here's what here are ways I've grown. And then I actually love it when somebody says, and my last boss, or my last mentor, or my coach, or my whomever has given me, these 5 things to do, or these 5 things to work on to continue to get better in those areas. However, I have found that, hiring for myself, or having somebody underneath me that helps me with those weaknesses has really been a great thing. So, in other words, if I'm a salesperson and I'm going for an amazing sales job, it's okay for me to say, when I have somebody take that paperwork off of me, though, man, I'm unstoppable. And so, to have a team, it's really great. And I love it when they change the script on me and then say, what would you do for me? Or what could the company do for me to help me grow in that area? Or what kind of, operations team do you have that would help me be really good with that, the things that I'm not good at, right? Because then all of a sudden you throw that other person back on their heels, and then they start selling you, right? Well, we have an operations team, and they're going to take care of all of your paperwork, and then all of a sudden you've got them talking, and whoever's doing the talking is doing the bonding, right? So let's bring them back into the conversation and turn it around on them and make them engage with me. That's when I have somebody do that, I'm like, all right, you're good.
Yeah, that's great. Great stuff. And I think, I'm just saying this, I think you two should get married and start a business together. Call me crazy, or Captain Obvious, but you pick the one. And you added there's so much gold there. The one other thing I really like is to also share that right now, in fact, I'm reading, and I happen to be listening to this on Audible, Think and Grow Rich. So if you share right in that moment, that you're engaged with, as Linzee said, with a coach, that you're in that moment engaged in a coach, reading a book, listening to a book, listening to a podcast, watching videos online on how to improve in this area. It shows so much to an employer or a recruiter that that alone speaks volumes. It says that you're growth oriented, that you're willing to learn, you're willing to grow, you're clear and aware, as you said, Steve, you're aware of your weaknesses. And by the way, if someone were to say, share your weaknesses or what areas that you need improvement, I'll say, well, wait a second, how long do we have on this interview?
Right.
So,
All the things, yeah.
yeah. And I said, if you don't think you have weaknesses or challenges, just ask your significant other. They'll tell you.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
that's why it's so easy to share on not being structured, Michael, because I'm not.
I get it. And by the way, we have that in common, Steve, because I literally have to closely, watch my calendars, and because we're people. We love talking to people. We love relationships, and that can really get out of control in terms of time and everything else.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. So we have your greatest strengths, a way to shine, your weaknesses, and isn't it interesting how, however you spin it and say what are your greatest weaknesses or areas that you need improvement in, or are going to send you away to a seminar, what would you want to learn? Understand when you're asked that question that you're really being put in a position to shine, to show how real and authentic you are, and to show that you're vulnerable in a positive way. And we're all human, and we connect on a human basis before we do on a business basis. And by doing that and preparing for this question, like you just heard Linzee and Steve share, just gold right there. If you prepare with that, and as if you were asked a question, I'll go one step further. Prepare, open up Zoom. You can get it for free and watch yourself. And if you don't like the way you look, believe me, they won't like the way you look either. So, and by the way, no one likes the way they look or sound the first time. So if you ever record yourself and say, oh my gosh, I sound like crap, don't worry. We all feel that way the first time we listen to ourselves. But the only way we can improve is by saying it over and over again and saying, you know what, I could tweak it here. I could sound a little better here. And we're not looking for perfection. Neither should you. You're looking for progress. So continue to do it over and over again. Don't bury your head in the ground. Listen to yourself, either record yourself, and better yet, since these are done on Zoom, get Zoom. You get free, I think, 45 minutes without paying. Zoom yourself. Watch how you would look to the prospective person hiring you, and say, if you don't like the way you look, do it again and improve. And we all do that. And that's what the pros do. That's what you should do if you want to shine. You both agree with that? Make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit a lot of awesome things there. I definitely agree about the growth mind and reading, right? Readers are leaders. Yep. Yeah,
that's right. And it's interesting that, both coaching and leading, that is fascinating that the ones who you would think need it the least do it the most. Yeah. So the ones that need it the most do it the least. It's counterintuitive. It's like it just doesn't make any sense that why would Tony Robbins still need to read or be coached or speak to people that are smarter than him in areas that like finance, and he's not his superpower, because he realized, speaking of Warren Buffett and people like that, is because everyone knows that we don't know when our brake light's out. We don't know, we can't see our blind spots. Yeah. And by getting coached, that's the way you get better. And when you read, you get better. You can get away from this stuff. So, I spend time now out of my little deck, reading, laying out at night, and just for listening to an audiobook for 45 minutes to an hour. And all the great ones do that. And if you want to be a great one, if you want to get a job, your choice, do it or don't do it, but it's your choice.
Yep.
Yep.
So let's get to back to the resume now. Okay, so how important, things have changed. We talked about that. A lot of things are being done on Zoom. A lot of more people are competing for the same job. What makes a resume, how important are resumes? On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being, Mike, just amazingly important. 1 being, why are you doing a resume? Steve, where do you think that falls today? And then we'll do what makes a great resume.
That's a great question. I think it's still a 9 or 10. I would describe it still as the currency of employment. So it's still the way that we are going and doing the things that we do. People are doing different things with resumes now, or you could, right? People are doing virtual resumes a little bit more. People are spicing up their resumes. You still want something that's going to hit the applicant tracking system the right way, of course, if you're applying to bigger corporate jobs, that sort of thing. But I would say it's still the currency. It's still the way that we recognize people in that brief snapshot that we get in that 8 to 10 seconds that we're going to consider you as a candidate.
Great, wonderful, well said. And Lindsay was nodding her head. Yeah, she liked that currency. Yeah, that she's gonna. Yeah, she was shaking her head. The shaking the head means she's going to steal that and use it. Okay, Lindsay,
She will. So it's fine.
I do that all the time. Well, I just heard Les Brown, who I love as a speaker, and I just heard him on Clubhouse, and he said, and anyone listening to this is great advice, because we're talking about books and reading and advancing our knowledge. What you tune into, you turn into. Isn't that great? What you tune into is what you turn into.
Love that.
So yeah, it's great. So Lindsay, how about you? 1 to 10, where would you rank resumes today?
I'm gonna back it down a little from a 9 to 10. I'm gonna say it's probably a 7. Still very important, but I do believe you can go get a position by knowing somebody, right? People say that all the time. It's who you know that gets you in, right? I still believe that. And I do think you can, again, there's proactive approaches and there's reactive approaches. I believe that you can be very proactive, but only a small percentage of the world will choose to be that way, right? Which means that resumes are still very important. So, I think they're important, and I think you've got to make them look great. You've got to have a LinkedIn profile that's actually put on there, and more things, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So
how did you know that? But we can always count on Lindsay to plant that seed, which I love. Thank you for doing that, Lindsay. So okay, so and I hear this across the board, and I coach on that. It absolutely 100% networking. We've heard your network is your net worth, and all that, and who you know, and both at church and synagogue and at the soccer field, and who your colleagues, your past employers and employees that you work with. I mean, ask everyone, tell everyone what you're doing, get it out there, because a lot of jobs are not publicly on job posts. They're not publicly out there, and you can get an inside track by doing what you said. Lindsay, you said it right. Very few people do that. We talk about that a lot. We coach on that a lot. That network a great deal. But to your point, every little thing counts. And if you're going to be posting a resume, to your point earlier, Steve, make sure it ties into the job. You're not, as a factory worker, you're not applying for a sales leadership position for $100,000 a year. That's why we have applicant tracking systems to flush out. Yep. It's so easier to apply online. You have to flush out these where there's no matches with keywords and phrases. So now, Steve, talk to what it really takes to have a great resume. And what do you think? I've heard, I don't want to plant the seeds as Lindsay always plants the seeds. I don't want to plant the seed as to how long a recruiter and or a hiring manager will look at a resume. I want each of you to speak to that and tell me what you think. And then with that X number of seconds, notice I didn't say minutes, I'm setting it up. We know it's seconds. So with the X number of seconds that they're looking at a resume, what do you think needs to stand out? How does it stand out?
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Yeah. And so I think Lindsay hit on some of this that was really important. And again, I think this is going to depend on what kind of position are you applying to and what are the expectations around that industry, right? So if you're applying to, a corporate kind of world position, I would probably go with more business kind of resume that's going to be more simple. It's going to, not going to include a picture or something of you or something like that. Maybe that's changing, but I think it's still pretty uniform that you're presenting yourself in a business way. If you're applying to a small business, I think there's all different kinds of ways that you can find ways to stand out. And your resume can become a tool for that. One easy one, and there's pros and cons to this, but would be put a picture of yourself on your resume. find a great template that's kind of put a little design into that resume. We love a website called, we'll give canva.com a plug. You can literally go on there and just type in resume and find 500 examples of what a great resume could look like. But I'm a big believer in that we've moved in the 21st century toward this connection kind of model. And I think that means people want to know you. They want to know what you look like. They're going to probably look you up on Facebook and LinkedIn anyway. So they'll find out what you look like. So just put yourself out there. A great professional photo is a little simple thing in the small business world to say, hey, this is who I am. Again, that authenticity idea. This is what I look like. This is who I am. So I think I am someone that does believe that brevity is best still. So I would say 1 to 2 pages. I don't care what you've done, simplify that down so that I can understand it. And then of course, this is, a marketing tool, right? Your resume isn't about all of the things you've done in your life, right? This is a tool to get you to the next step of the process. And that's another useful way, I think, to think of it. You're marketing yourself to the job world.
Yeah, that's great. And so what would you say, Steve? And by the way, there, as you know, and you said it, there's pros and cons. Most common belief is do not put, and this is contrary to what I like, do not put a picture. And I think the picture will cause a problem with the applicant tracking systems.
Yeah.
So if you're applying for, and I'll just qualify this, tell me if you agree, if you're applying for a job with a big company that uses an applicant tracking system, which is software that vets out resumes and will toss them into the black hole if you don't have keywords in your resume that match keywords in the job description, that if you don't have that there's certain things like graphs and grids and pictures will automatically send you in that black hole. Big companies don't have the picture. There's a time that you can do that. Have a picture in your signature line if you're sending an email, and that would be a way to get a picture in. However, smaller or mid-sized companies that are less likely going to use an applicant tracking system, that's where I personally love it, because you're right. They've done studies that when you see someone with interviews, you're more inclined, the person with the smile and the more attractive person, as far as appearance, I'm not talking natural beauty here, just is always going to get a better view, and they'll be more open and receptive to what that person's saying just based on their appearance. So if you can get that appearance as a plus right off the bat, you're good. Go ahead, Steve.
Another thing I would just comment on and say, I think you're 100% right. Again, it's going to depend more on the industry. So be careful there. The other thing I would say is, who says you only have to have one version of your resume, right? So maybe you have the more standard one that gets submitted. You get yourself into the interview process. How cool would that be if, hey, I know this was the resume you got online. I also wanted to give you this resume. It's similar kind of content, but you could have more than one version of your resume for sure, depending on what you're applying to.
Yeah, and make it specific for that job, which I really love. You have a good baseline resume that speaks to the industry and the job at large, but each company has their nuances, what they really want qualification-wise. And if you could tweak it, I always love the customization aspect. The more it speaks to them and their specific needs, the higher the likelihood it's gonna resonate. And that's what we want. We want it to resonate and you to stand out. And customization takes time. Most people don't put the time in. Here's your chance to differentiate yourself. Put the time in, differentiate, customize. I love the idea of having multiple resumes, a good baseline, and then have variations of that, and then customize it even more for the company. Steve, to finish this, what would you put? By the way, I don't know if we talked about how many seconds. Did he answer that, or was he skirting that? He was skirting that question, Steve. Go ahead. How many seconds will a recruiter or the hiring manager?
That's we call this, we joke around about this maybe for male pattern baldness a little bit, but we call it the once through comb over. When what that means is you're probably going to get about 6 to 10 seconds, right? If you really want someone to get more into that, you have to get noticed in that time, right? So you got to think about the person on the other side of this, right? They might be looking at 100 to 200 resumes or more per day, right? So in order to get me to stop whatever I'm doing in my resume mode, there's got to be something that sticks out, right? If you want me to notice your hair, you got to at least put the comb through one time. So, you want to at least give it that initial look, and that's more on the aesthetic of your resume. And that's going to get you the notice part, right? Okay, I'm grabbing someone's attention. That's step one. Step two is once I've got your attention, then they're going to look at the actual content. So most recruiters are not going to go through line by line. We don't have time to do that. You want something to connect with them like that, and then you'll get noticed more, and they'll spend more time thinking about you. And then you might spend 30 to 60 seconds, and that's going to also separate you from a lot of people if you can do both of those things.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what you do to do that. I learned a long time ago, a marketing guy said it on many episodes, and I thought it was great for marketing, and it has to do with a resume, with speaking, with a meeting. It's called AIDCC: attention, interest, desire, conviction, close. Those are the steps. So you first, and you mentioned it, Steve, you have to get their attention. After you get their attention, you gain their interest. Say something specific that you know will hook them to want to read more, right? You want that hook.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask you, with that being said, here you are, you're on the hot seat, Steve, but after all, that's why you came on the show. So Steve, what would be, you as a recruiter, what would you look for in a resume that would get your attention? Give the audience a practical example. What would get their attention that would also perhaps go through the applicant tracking system? And then what would gain their interest to get them to want to read more? Give me an example. You do that in real estate. What are some of the things that got you to say, hey, I want to talk to this person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got most of that. Looks like we cut out there for a second. But again, when I say aesthetic, I mean, like, is your information organized? If you're using bullets at one point and then you're using stars at the next point, that's just going to annoy me. And you don't want to annoy your recruiter before you've even talked to them, right? So I would say, when I say aesthetic, I mean, simple things like, putting your information in an organized, spatially visual way that's going to attract someone. And again, if you're doing the more small business way of going at it, you might be able to put a little bit of color on there, or your picture, or something that's going to make you stand out like that. We always looked for a LinkedIn profile as well on a resume. So, have a clear header. Do you include a summary statement? Obviously, you're going to have some of your experience on there, your education. Recruiters are going to look for all of those things. That's kind of that next level to answer your question. But if it's not organized in a thoughtful way, I already feel like you haven't spent that much time thinking about your resume.
Okay, and it did cut out, and you answered most of it, probably the part that cut out. So at the top, for everyone's edification, you like to have clear at the top your heading, your name, your LinkedIn profile. Do you like the summary? Is it your opinion and preference as a recruiter? You like a short summary at the top, and what would you look at and say, wow, this is a great summary, or this summary, a nice alliteration here, this summary sucks?
Yeah. Well, and there's different opinions on that as well. Personally, I do like it, but again, it has to be meaningful. If you give me some very generic, watered down version of, I'm looking for a job. Well, of course you're looking for a job, right? I've seen resumes that have had quotes on them from other people they admire. That's stood out. One time, I hired a salesperson. Their summary statement was, I book leads, good ones. And that was it. And I was like, I loved that, because they knew what they did well and they communicated this. That was just an interesting one. So you can be a little cheeky. I think sometimes it's okay to take a little bit of risks in this process, right? That's how you get yourself to stand out. But I would say, there's pros and cons to the summary statement. I like them if they're done in a meaningful way. Okay.
And meaningful, as I got it from you, is speak in terms of, instead of the generalities, like I'm very focused or I'm very driven. I think everyone is using that. And I think if you say, what does that mean to them? That focus and driven is really a feature. It's not a benefit. So I like the idea of the one with the leads. I book leads. I mean, ultimately, if you're hiring someone in real estate or someone in sales, I set appointments, I close deals, and I'm always learning and growing. And I want to get better. And I second place doesn't pay well, and it's not right for me. I want to always be the leader and top of the leaderboard. If I read that, it's like, this person is confident, not cocky. It says exactly what we want in that person when we hire, and that would resonate. And less is more and simple is better. Certainly, Einstein had a great quote, since you mentioned quotes, and I'm a quote lover, is that, and this is beautiful, and this has to do with the resume, to your point, things should be made as simple as they can, but never simpler. And that is so profound and so powerful.
Yeah.
And that's how your resume should be. As simple as it can be, right? But not simpler than it should be.
That's right.
You have to have the key and the core content that will help someone make an educated decision in your favor. So I love everything you said about the resume. And we know Linzee is chomping at the bit. I can see right here. Mike, she's like raising the hand, like, it's call me, please call me. But yeah, Linzee, tell us, like, first of all, how many seconds does someone look at a resume, a hiring manager, a recruiter? Do you have to get their attention, gain their interest, to pull them through, to read more, to say, yeah, I want this person?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's the same thing, 5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fast, right? I'm looking at it real fast and I'm moving on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so we got that, and that's pretty much the preponderance of answers is, yeah, 5 to 7 seconds. And so therefore, as you're writing this resume, in the first 5 to 7 seconds, depending on how fast the person reads, it better be your best stuff that's most meaningful to them, and it better be customized. So with that being said, that's your setup, Linzee. What would be the best customized information that you could put there that would get their attention and gain their interest? And we just paused again. Okay.
Nope.
There you go. Okay. Did you hear? We paused for a second there with the video. We have, I wish I could blame it on storms here, but we don't have any storms going on. So there was a glitch for a few seconds. Did you hear the question, Linzee?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And you know, it's interesting and that's partially why I was sitting there going, gosh, I want to just jump in here and I waited. But it's funny, you know, I'm going to take this from a different place, right? The reason why we started this business is because when I was applying to positions, I got really good at this stuff and I figured out how to do some of this, right? And so, you know, we're talking about those systems that are going to pump your resume out to a bunch of different places. I would love for us to say, you know what, if you really want to get hired, then you need to not care about all that. And you need to go find the positions that you want. And your resume actually needs to have bullet points in the first 3 or 5 sentences that are going to capture my eyes. So in other words, when I was applying to a social media position, for example, I would specifically in my last job, put the first 5 things would be all, what I did that were to, help the social media of that company and to grow it. And I would put the stats right there and I would bold the stats, right? And every single time I would get those calls because I was really strategic about what my resume said every time. And I changed it every time, right? And my summary, I might have it, but I might take it away if I felt like they needed to see those bullet points and those, things that I did for those companies to grow those companies first, right? And so, I loved what he said about the salesperson. If you're going to do something, it's got to be like that to capture somebody's attention. And I really want to stress to everybody that, again, don't let it just go through those portals. Get your resume, the pretty one, instead of where ZipRecruiter and all those things just make it look not as good, and actually go try to figure out how to apply to the company. They all have websites. They all have emails. Send it in, follow up with a phone call. I want to make sure that you receive this because I'm very interested in your position and your company, right? That's a totally different world. And that's how you get hired, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's great. That's gold from both of you. And, one of the things you mentioned right there, Linzee, and it's certainly been echoed before, and I'm a huge proponent of this. And as you listen to this right now, heed these words. Do not follow just the conventional way to submit a resume and wonder why you never got a call back. It's those that are doing the extra creative things that calling a CEO, sending flowers, and sending a silver platter with your resume on a silver platter. I talked about that in the last episode. Silver platters cost $14 online, and they have handles and they're engraved and they look like they're worth $70, and put your resume right on the silver platter, send it out. It has to get to the president because the secretary is going to say, what do you want me to do with the silver platter? And he or she is going to say, what's on it? And they say, it's an envelope addressed to you. Well, what's the envelope say? And there your resume gets to the CEO. You're creative, you're bold, you're adventurous. Everything they want to hire, you just demonstrated for $20, shipping included. So do those creative things.
Yeah.
Be bold. You'll stand out. You have to stand out in the sea, the vastness of everyone applying. And if you do it the same way everyone else is doing, you won't stand out. So I love the fact of, see if there's an inside track. Go on their LinkedIn profile, see who they know that you know, and ask for an introduction. All these little extra things will get you one step closer. Did you want to add anything to what Linzee said, or other than just telling her she's brilliant, that's why you married her? And
That one, so I think
let's shift over to LinkedIn. As recruiters, what percentage of the time do you look at a potential candidate's LinkedIn profile?
all the time. I mean, I think honestly, it's usually going to be after the resume phase, but the next stage is your social resume, right? And we've seen people that are amazing candidates fall out of the process because of one, not to talk about politics, but be careful what you put about politics on your Facebook or your Twitter or whatever, right? We've seen people lose opportunities because of that, or because of, one, I think people know that, but do they actually do that advice? So I think the LinkedIn, or I would call it your social resume, should also be quite clean when you're applying positions, because if they're not, someone's going to find out.
Yeah, that's great advice. And to elaborate on that a little bit is, you talk about political, you talk about the nonsense, the goofiness, not the real life stuff. But if you're looking at it and saying, would I show this to an employer, is really, I guess, the asset test. What would an employer think if they saw this about me? If I was the employer, what would I think? It's okay if your friends see it, but understand now, to your point, Steve, great point, that employers, hiring managers, recruiters are looking at all social media. Everyone looks at LinkedIn, but even your Facebook and your Instagram, if you have stuff that's controversial, that's stupid, that's edgy, or has profanity, you're going to lose points, and in most cases lose an opportunity, even if you had a great resume, because you're going to say this is a true reflection of who this person is, and they don't match culturally with what we're looking for in the company. So I love that not only what to do, but what not to do and what to be careful of, Steve. I think that's spot on, and great advice for anyone. So to elaborate on the LinkedIn, the good stuff now, what would make a great LinkedIn profile for a recruiter and for a hiring manager?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, have you actually completed all of your LinkedIn profile? I mean, that's a little simple one, but again, do you actually have a banner photo? Do you have a nice professional photo? I always start with like the simple things, but I'm not, you can really tell some people have just done the bare minimum there, and then other people have really filled it out in more detail. Have you filled in some of the actual content about some of your career history? Is all of your information up to date? I would always encourage people graduating out of college also, don't include a education email. I would always have your own kind of private email or some kind of professional one. They're little things, but like, not to knock on Hotmail too much, but Hotmail was like a 2000s kind of email. So when I see that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this person set up their email about 30 years ago. That's okay. But like, maybe set up a more current email, like a Yahoo or a Gmail or something like that. That's going to show you're also current with, because people are going to want to know, does this person know how to use technology? And if you set up your email 20, 30 years ago and you haven't updated, you're still on AOL with the dial-up, that's kind of an issue.
Yeah, and there's one thing I want to add to that is, don't have like hotbabe@gmail.com.
That's right. That's right.
Or Stanley the Stud. Like, if you have a name like that associated with your email address, to your point of Outlook or Yahoo, get rid of those, and also be conscious of that if you have, like I said, a Hot Babe or Stanley the Stud.
Okay. A Hot Babe, just use another email address.
Unless you're applying for a job at a gentleman's club, which we're not going to talk about. So anyway, that would be tied into the specific job. So so what else? So you have a professional image. You talk about great for college grads. How do you feel about having ask a few people for some testimonials to have on your LinkedIn. Do you like the testimonials in your LinkedIn?
Oh, absolutely. And I think yeah, and I think, having people put some of your skills is another thing. That again, like if you're looking for a position, they're looking for certain kinds of skills. I think great companies hire for the talent more than the skill base. That's just my opinion on how companies should hire. But I would say that, like, if you have a public speaking skill or you've done Toastmasters or something that sets you apart, like, hey, have people recommend your skill base. That's definitely something that can make you stand out too.
Beautiful. Lindsay, how do you feel? What would make a great LinkedIn? Well, first of all, do you agree, Lindsay, that looking at LinkedIn profiles is, as a recruiter, do you do that all the time? Look at the LinkedIn
I do,
profile?
yeah. It's funny. I do think these days we are going to, I go less now to LinkedIn, believe it or not, and more towards Instagram and Facebook and looking at those things because I think they tell a better story than LinkedIn. It's really easy for us to be really professional and good there. But then the moment that you go to like an Instagram, it's like a disaster. You know, so I actually go there more now, which I probably should say.
Okay, no, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. I think to both of your points,
Mhm.
A, you need to have a very professional, well thought out, take the time. It's your ad for you. It's your advertisement for you, and it's to help you shine to a prospective employer or recruiter. So make sure it has all the things that are important to them. That's number one. And like you said, the education, the skills, the qualifications, the picture, all those things. Now, to Lindsay's point, which I love, is that's really an asset test. That's a deal breaker. That I think that's really a cool idea. That if you have, going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, if you have crap, things that are undesirable or controversial on your Facebook, your Instagram, and whatever the other ones, I don't really have many others other than Twitter and things like that. If it's controversial and you have stuff on there that's either political or sexual or whatever it might be, if you really want a job, get it off. That's not the place for it. It's if you want a job. If you don't, then that's okay. You continue with it. So
Well, I think to think about those things too, just to add something there. Like I had somebody who had a love for medieval times, and I mean, just swords and like weapons all over the page. She was amazing, and I as a recruiter actually had to force my client into meeting with her, and had to force him to consider like, hey, like this is just she's really into this. Like, we got to talk about it and to see what the deal is. But it was weird. His perception, which, and it was very, it was harmless, right? But his perception just going to the social media was so bad. And so I think you do have to just think about it like something that it might seem harmless to you, might not seem harmless to a business owner who's been around for 60 years or whatever, 40 years. You just got to think about that a little bit and who owns the company and all those things.
yeah, and perception is reality, and we can't look at it from what. And listen, it's kind of a paradox. It's a little difficult because this should be your social media should be a reflection of you.
Yeah.
And so that no one would argue with that. It should be. I want it to reveal truly who I am: the goofy, the smart, the aggressive, the caring, the loving. I want everyone to see every part of me on my social media. I'm pretty much an open book. And now I want to temper that with, if I'm looking for a position with a company, how are other people, i.e. hiring managers and recruiters, how are they going to view that? How are they going to perceive that? Do I need to clean it up a little bit and make it a little more professional, still not losing my identity, but making it where it's not going to hurt me, and maybe it will just keep me in a neutral place? Would that be something you guys would agree with?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Michael. I'm glad you said that. Like, you don't need to whitewash your life. I mean, sometimes before it was resume, they called it a CV. That's curriculum vitae, the course of your life, which is, it's your life on paper. And like, it's okay for you to have a life, I think is the point you're making, right? Like, so you don't need to whitewash your life. But I think, just keep in mind that it's public knowledge once you put it out there too. And I think it's about what are you looking to do and get to what goals you desire. And as you said, like, you know, if you're aspiring toward getting a more professional kind of career going, you want to consider these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. So as we kind of wind down, which you're probably happy for, we've been on this for around 2.5, 3 hours. No, it hasn't been that long, but listen, it flew by. I've loved it. And I'm certain that the listeners have loved it as well. So such gold here. What one bit of advice today in this climate that we're in with the pandemic, even though thank God it's getting better now, what bit of advice, if you were to say, hey, listen, it could be from an attitude standpoint, could be from a persistence and resilience standpoint, anything that you would say if you were talking to, which you are right now, talking to a job seeker, this is my best advice to you right now. And it is, Steve, what would you say?
Yeah. So I think this is the one thing too, that like we really care about as recruiters. Like we're not in the business of, you know, tearing people apart. I think the one thing I would encourage anybody listening that's looking for a job would be, it'll happen. So just have faith. If you really are pursuing this with all your might, it'll happen. I think to make that thing happen, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Take some risks. Don't be afraid to fail, right? I mean, I think that's going to show like we like people that are nervous for interviews more than that have it all together or kind of are nonchalant, don't care. A lot of our clients have said, oh, she was really nervous and I like that because it means she cared or he cares about this kind of position. So I think believe that you will get the job because I know that it's been frustrating for a lot of people. I mean, especially last March, it was just awful and it was really hard. We saw just people coming out of the woodwork and applying and it was scary. So believe number one, that it'll happen. And I think number two, you know, put yourself out there, take some risks. Don't be afraid to look a little silly. Your employer, future employer will notice that you care and that's the person they're going to hire.
Well said. And what bit of advice would you give someone, Linzee, that was, you know, right now in this challenging time, frustrated? You know, am I ever going to get a job? Anyone ever going to call me back for an interview? What would you say to them?
I know I've like banged the drum this whole time about being proactive. So I know that, you know, that has to happen in this job market. But I would say really getting specific and really figuring out what do you want as an employee? Like, you know, what are your values and what kind of companies and what kind of job do you really want? I think this market has caused people to just, you know, it always causes people to just try to find the job. It doesn't matter what the job is. It's just so much further from the truth. I think it really matters. Like, what do you really want to do? What are you gifted in? Like, what are your values? Are there companies out there that match that? And then go be proactive and get that company to talk to you, no matter what it takes. I'll start at the ground level, answer the phones, like just get me in here because you align with what I want to do and I want to learn how to be a part of your world. That's a different conversation. And I think a lot of people are missing the boat on trying to figure out what they really want to do and what they're passionate about. So
beautiful. Well, this has been outstanding for me. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot. As I always tell those listening to the podcast episodes that, you know, information without action is wasted. So I encourage you, in fact, Steve and Linzee, the three of us, encourage you to take a few of these things, throw away what you don't like, keep what you do like, go and put these things into practice that resonate with you. And we know, we're not saying this might work. This will work, 100%. We see it working every day. These are tried and proven. I like to call them universal laws and simple truths about getting a job. These are things that will absolutely move you closer to your job, faster to get that job. Steve said, you know, it's all about patience and persistence. And that's kind of where you want to be with your job search. Don't be deflated or defeated. You know, remember the road to success is all uphill. The elevator to success is broken. You got to take the stairs. However you want to look at it, it's going to be just a persistent and patient challenge for you to keep moving forward, get better, follow the advice that these two experts gave you, and you'll see yourself inside the job of your dreams in no time. Steve, Lindsay, this has been a blessing, a joy. You guys are awesome, and can't wait to see how many lives we can change together.
Absolutely.
Love it. Thank you for
Thank
what
you,
you're
Michael.
doing.
Yeah.
My